This is Lloyd with the DripDropz team, and today we are going Treasury constraints. This is part of our governance series. This is a CIP-1694 workshop, and the results of this workshop will be shared to the staff at IOG that's compiling everything, and it will be part of the presentation in Edinburgh in July. And so happy to have everybody here at the Catalyst After Town Hall today. Thank you all for your participation, and we're going to jump right in and get started. So first, we'll start with a few basic ground rules. This is a workshop, not a debate. So we're not here to debate whether or not 1694 should go forward or if a competing proposal should go forward. Instead, what we're doing is we're having a workshop on a topic that fits within the purview of 1694. Not saying that that's a bad discussion to have to see competing proposals, but I'm saying it's not the venue today. So let's please keep today's discussion on this topic as much as possible. And the only other ground rules are mutual respect and courtesy. If someone's speaking, let them finish speaking before you interrupt to add your comment. We'll make room for everybody to speak today, and we'll try to constrain people's comments to roughly 2 or 3 minutes each. If they have an extended topic, we can schedule more time. And lastly, again, uninterrupted listening. Let other people finish speaking before, and try to engage them. Try to engage your hearing muscles. Hear what they have to say before adding your response. So first, what does the CIP say? It's a Cardano improvement proposal for starting the governance avenue of the Cardano blockchain. So it's under construction. Currently, there's a plan for a bootstrap phase where we will launch it, and there'll be a time where things won't be quite the finished product, but it'll move us toward that finished product. There are incentives possible for staking rewards, for DREPs, for on-chain and off-chain incentives. There's all kinds of possibilities still that none of this is finalized. And so the work that we're doing right now is to try to find a means to gain some community consent or some community involvement in what it is that each of these different areas might need. And today's, again, is a Treasury constraints. So whether or not to put limitations on how fast money can be removed from the Treasury to pay for things via the proposals that go into the CIP 1694 governance. So why should we constrain the Treasury? Just in a brief bit of research preparing for today's session, I easily located 3 different examples within the last year of someone maliciously gaining access to voting power, and by doing so, stripping entire DAOs of all of their Treasury funds. So it's not a theoretical exercise, it actually has happened in blockchain communities. Now, I like to think that we've got better security, we've got better, Nakamoto coefficient, we've got all these other things that work in our favor. Even so, the possibility of a hostile takeover due to some unseen, problem is a real possibility. So that is something that putting a constraint on the Treasury could resolve. It could, allow us to make changes quickly to stop someone who was doing so, rather than the entire Treasury be removed and then we do something about it. The other thing it does is it will effectively reduce the Treasury drain rate. So that could be something that could be done as a means, if the community chooses it, to constrain how quickly we drain the funds just in general, just saying that, hey, we want to set up for the future. And part of that is not allowing the Treasury to go below a certain percentage, for instance. This can and maybe should be a modifiable protocol parameter, one that could be voted on and adjusted as time goes on as needed in order to do that. So it doesn't have to be a fully fixed thing. It can be a variable thing. It could be done with math. There's other ways it could be done. So, and like I said, very quick, that's it for the layout. I'd like to jump into the Figma board. So if you guys follow the link that I put in the chat, I'll put it in one more time if anybody came in later. You can go to that presentation, go to the last slide and grab that FigJam board link. There's also a link to the CIP-1694 if you don't already have that. And I will switch over to that. Let's see. You guys should now see the FigJam board up, hopefully. The first thing thank you. The first thing I like to do at the beginning of each of these is I put up a governance temperature check. The question for today is it's a statement that says that you either agree or disagree with. There should be constraints on withdrawals from the Cardano Treasury and CIP-1694. Now I'm going to zoom way out so people they can take their time and go in, and you can vote on that. We just do this as a temperature check. We want to get everybody's opinion coming into this. You know, what do you think? So, and if everybody's had
Lloyd, how do I vote on this?
So you just click inside with your cursor, you click inside and it should actually register your vote right away. And it'll say up in the top right, it registered your vote.
So just click inside that blue box.
Yeah, just click inside the blue box, wherever on the line you want it to be, right?
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
So let's see. Yeah, it looks like there's been 2 people vote so far. And like I said, I'm zoomed way out. So, you know, it gives you guys time to.
This is a pretty broad thing to vote on, though.
Sure it is. But that's actually the idea. It's just, should there be constraints at all on the Treasury? It is possible for someone to think that that's not a good idea, that it should just be, you know, they could have a perfectly valid reason that they don't want to put any constraints on the Treasury other than obviously the voting mechanisms to vote however much money is needed, you know, for any particular project. The argument could be made that, hey, there's this huge, you know, Apple or Microsoft or somebody that wants to come to our chain, but they need this large amount of money. And if we have a constraint, maybe we can't give it to them. I've heard that as I think a valid argument to this, but that's exactly why we're doing the temperature check to see where people fall on that. You know, make sure it's open so that Microsoft can come in, or let's be more protective of the Treasury.
I mean, a majority of the constraints come in from Catalyst itself by determining what the maximum amount of funding will be per each round.
Well, that's Catalyst, but this is CIP-1694. So that's, you know, Catalyst, if things continue to go the direction that I understand them, Catalyst will have a budget that's given from a CIP-1694 budget proposal. So they'll get an annual.
It's getting decoupled, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So what'll happen is that Catalyst will be one line item that will get voted for, but then so will any number of other things, including possibly paying for new development, new features for the blockchain, paying for people to run security audits, or, you know, you name it. This is a different avenue than Catalyst itself. And Catalyst will just be a line item. Yes, Rick.
Yeah, I would like to add, in case anyone wasn't aware, this will be full auto. So yeah, once if a Treasury withdrawal is submitted and it gets approved by the 2 approving entities, I think in this case it would be DripDropz and the Constitutional Committee.
You're right. Yes.
That's going to be automatic. There's not going to be anyone in the middle to stop it.
That's right. And that is how it's stated right now. Thank you, Rick, for clarifying that. Tommy, go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, hear you fine.
I'm active in Kusama and Polkadot also, and Kusama went full auto last year. Mm-hmm. So what happened is people started like submitting all sorts of proposals, and they were very much approved in the beginning. Uh-huh. So sorry, I need to go.
No worries. Thank you for that. And yes, exactly. This is one of those things where, there's a real possibility of things happening in a good way, but there's also a real possibility of things happening in ways that we either don't expect or don't encourage. And so that's what we're hoping to talk about a bit today. Let's go back down in here. Okay, so we've got everybody's had their opportunity to vote, and it looks
I tried, but it's I'm on my phone and it's just hard.
that's okay. I totally understand. And yeah, this is, it's easier on the computer for sure. All right. So
Where's the link to vote? I didn't see it in the chat.
it's let me see. I can share.
It's in the document. You can
It
find the
doesn't
link in
show
there.
history. If you joined
Yeah.
after we posted it, you won't be able to see it.
Yeah,
Oh, good
here's
point.
a direct link to the Figma. I just posted a direct link to the Figma. So if anybody doesn't have it, you can just go right there and jump in there and vote.
Yeah, we were automatic too up until Fund 8, I think.
For Catalyst, yeah. Pretty
Yeah.
much. There really wasn't anything in the way. And with the results that we saw. So so I'm gonna pull us down to the next area here. This is a brainstorm area. What we'd like to do, because we're talking about Treasury constraints, is where, just in general, do you think a constraint should be? Do you think it should be over a certain dollar figure? Do you think it should be before certain things happen? There's sticky notes down at the bottom. All you have to do is grab a sticky note and you can stick it right on the board. And you can type in there, and it's free form. So, but what we're looking for is, where do you think a place, if at all, or I don't think we should put any, is fine to put up there. But if you think there should be a constraint, where do you think the constraint should exist? Should it be over a certain amount of ADA? Should it be every transaction? Should there be different levels of constraints? Things of that nature. So this is the brainstorming session. And this is where we put our ideas around constraints upon the Treasury prior to the automatic withdrawal. So in other words, if somebody puts in 1 million ADA withdrawal request and we have a restraint that says you can only have 100,000 ADA every 5 days, then that million could still go out, but it would go out every 5 days at 100,000 every 5 days. That's a viable possible option. Or if it's over a certain amount of ADA, it has to have a higher threshold for approval, perhaps. So that's what we're at here. We can take 5 or 10 minutes here to think about this, and feel free to write your comment. If you happen to agree with a comment, there are also stickers down below, and you could click on stickers, and you could add a star or a 100 or something like that to drag and place on the corner of somebody if you agree with what they're doing. Feel free to use any of the agree or disagree, kind of statements. +1s are great. That's awesome. Yeah, anything like that to signal agreement to anything. And if you have your own statement you'd like to add, please add it as well. All right, so looking on the board, what I see so far, I see a maximum percent of ADA withdrawn from the Treasury based on the balance of the Treasury and the amount of ADA allocated to the Treasury per epoch. And then once that percent threshold is met, no more ADA can be withdrawn from the Treasury until some level returns above the threshold. Okay, and that's a very strong component that would protect the Treasury for sure. I see Anthony with percent of total treasury balance as a constraint, which is a very good one. I definitely like the idea of benchmarking the Polkadot OpenGov spec, because learning from other communities that have already been through this and taking their learning home, that's a great idea. And I think it's important that we.
So the main point there is that they have different tracks for different types of proposals. So if you're just dealing with like small amounts, then that's like a fast track. But if you want to change the entire code, then that's a very different process.
Very good. And that's similar to what we were talking about just in general with voting on proposals, that there will probably be a lot lower constraint if it's a 100 or 1,000 or some low number of ADA. And then there would be, if you get to that million ADA, there'd have to be some much larger percentage of people even voting on it to forcing it to go through. So I think some of that learning. Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah. The gentleman who just spoke, can you elaborate on that a little bit on the sticky and put it on the board if you don't mind? That's a very good point.
Bottom right corner.
Yeah, the yellow one. Yeah.
Hmm.
For example, what you said with if it's a very small proposal, it's a fast track, and if it's a very large proposal,
bottom right corner, the pink one, it has two links. So you can check the Polkadot OpenGov and then specifically this origins and tracks idea.
Perfect. Thank you. I need to read up on that too.
Mm-hmm.
Don't worry, it's new for me. I'm a Polkadot ambassador and I don't completely understand it because it hasn't started yet in Polkadot. It started in Kusama last year and it was a wild ride. So they are a little bit cautious now implementing in Polkadot.
All right, great. And I went ahead, Rick, I just went ahead and added that, just a brief summary of that. So it's on our board as well for when we turn that in. I'm going to add that the links are there.
Thank you.
Excellent. All right. And let's see what do we have here. A dedicated Twitter bot and or website that tracks the treasury in real time. So not just constraining it from a programmatic standpoint on the front end, but also on the back end with reporting. So that's another great idea. I love doing these because we keep surfacing things that definitely should go back, up the chain and we get some information for us. That's wonderful. All right.
Are we looking for also what is the treasury going to be used for?
So
or just constraints on how the funds get
because
for example, who's requesting and what is this going to be for? Is it something that's going to be for the better of Cardano, that
right.
kind of stuff?
So that's part of the proposal process that goes to the vote. Okay. So that part is that's the kind of the machine works of getting a proposal through at all. What this is proposals get through and they're finished and they're going to be voted on to happen, and they get voted on. It's automatic. That means that once that vote goes through, those funds are released. And we're asking, should there be any limitations between the vote and the release of the funds? And that's what this is for today. Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, to add a little context to that, it could easily be something as simple as some company writing a version of the Rust node, like a Rust node variation, and asking for a certain amount of ADA, all the way to Tom Brady Super Bowl commercial ad. And I imagine it's going to be in the metadata as to what the proposal is for, but it's going to be up to the people voting on it to determine who submitted it, how reliable they are. Is it actually going to deliver? Does it actually have a good effect? So there's going to be a lot of detail that has to be drilled out. But I hope that kind of helps
Mhm.
You know, the spectrum could be anything, you know.
So are we like measuring that part too, or just what, like, are we taking just this as if, okay, it was voted on and whether the funds get distributed? That's the part that I'm trying. So I see a lot in here about like, yeah, you know, the percentage or whether this can happen or not, but I don't see anything in terms of, is this something that, you know, that is going to whatever, you know, push not just Tom Brady forward, but Cardano forward, for example.
Yeah, that'll be
Yeah.
up to the DREPs to decide when they
That's
vote
right.
on it.
Okay,
right.
so once that happens, then here we want to know whether the funds get distributed based on this other.
That's right. Should there be some other constraint after the vote is cast? Should the
Got
funds
it,
just
got
be
it.
dumped? Like, bam, there you go. Or is there some constraint that slows that ADA down so it can only be released at a certain amount? If that constraint's in place, that actually puts an onus on the voters, the DREPs, the Constitutional Committee, to say, hey, well, we've only got so much funds left this year that we can even push out into the world. So, you know, if we put more proposals through than we have money for, that's another way to look at the constraint, is an out of control government that wants all the money for themselves to spend it on something. This could constrain them from being able to spend down the whole treasury in a year.
That's what I mean, like a second layer of protection, right?
That's what this
Because,
is.
yeah.
That's exactly what this is finding is there a second layer of protection that slows the funds down so they can only go out in a, you know, certain amount. So, all right, I'm trying to look. I see some overarching themes here, and that's what I was going to try to do. Is I'm going to try to say proposal tracks. Actually, need to do it. Probably should do a different color. Let me do that. I'll do that in the circles. So we'll say proposal track. I see percent of total balance calculation. I see threshold per epochs. I see funding categories. And I see reporting. I see open reporting. Is that pretty fair, guys? A proposal track, a percent of the balance, the total balance calculation, a threshold every epoch for spending, funding categories, and open reporting. From what I'm seeing out here on the board, am I missing anything?
I had a question I submitted. Maybe it could be add a threshold per individual or project.
Okay, I'm going to put that up there. Yeah, proposal per individual or project, or threshold. Okay, so does that pretty much encapsulate the ideas that we've gotten during the brainstorm session?
It appears to.
All right, I'm going to drag these down. Now, the next part of the exercise is we're going to come down to the next level here, and I'm going to actually, I got to need to do them. We could take each one of these individually. Is this minimum viable governance? In other words, this needs to be in CIP-1694 and it needs to be coded in the initial bootstrap phase. Is it post minimum viable governance? It needs to be in the spec, but it doesn't necessarily have to be done prior to launch. And then the third option is off chain. Is it very important, but not part of the main tooling that IO is writing? Is it something that's separate? And for a couple of these, the open reporting one is actually an off-chain thing. That's a pretty, I think that's a pretty obvious one. the data is going to go on chain anyway, and the reporting system would work off chain. It would read the on chain results and it could just post them. So that one was a pretty easy one. Now, each of the rest of these will need to determine where do they fit, MVG, post MVG, or are they an off chain thing? Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to jump the shark there.
You're good.
I think thresholds per epoch would be MVG.
Okay.
That's just my take on that.
All right. Any other takes on that? Does the threshold per epoch means that only so much can be spent each epoch out of the treasury? Is that something that should absolutely be an MVG item?
I mean, I think maybe it should be done by quarters and, not by an epoch basis. It being on an epoch basis may severely limit projects that are building.
So Lee, you're saying that maybe you don't agree with the threshold per epoch. You think it should just be an overall threshold on the treasury itself is where you're coming from. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, Lloyd, I'd like, oh, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just saying that I'm fine with the restriction by quarters, but I think maybe the time frame is all. You know what I mean? Like if it's done by per epoch basis, it's going to make it harder for projects that are building and for funding of those. So
Sure.
Maybe it's just too restrictive.
Okay, maybe too restrictive. Okay, so we'll take that note there for that one. Rick, go ahead with your statement.
Yeah, I would like to expand. I think that purple circle doesn't describe exactly what we were trying to say.
Okay.
I don't think we defined it as threshold per epoch. I think we defined it as a threshold of the total treasury. So I think there needs to be a MVG that is percent. Yeah, so that one.
That's this one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So percent total of the balance of the treasury, regardless of epoch.
Okay, so regardless of the per epoch, and the threshold per epoch. Let's actually go ahead, Nudes, and then I'll finish my thought. Go ahead, Nudes.
Yeah, I was going to say, is there a way that maybe we can think about it being calibrated based on network activity so that if it's like meme season and there's 800 bajillion transactions for whatever coin is the latest thing, we can maybe up the amount because the treasury is going to get fed a little more. And then as we move into a bear market, network activity dies down, we can calibrate it sort of like accordingly based on some sort of formula.
Yeah, I agree with Nudes. Like you would have to, for example, the treasury is replenished currently at a rate of about 5 million, a little over 5 million ADA per epoch. So you wouldn't want to exhaust the treasury. It's kind of like the Tau prime that Michael Lazenfeld had described at some point. You wouldn't want to exhaust the treasury at a rate that's either much greater than, 5 million per epoch or whatever the amount going into the treasury. So this will take a lot more thought. I know this is just getting ideas, but we're going to have to lay out some math on this to say how much is going in, how much is going out.
Right. For
sure. What point does the treasury break because it fell below a certain level? Right.
Right. And that's, looking at the board here. So like the percent of the total balance of the treasury calculation being MVG just makes it seems we'd have to clear it obviously, but it seems like that would be the one that would be the easiest to propose and build. It would just have that obvious, there's a limitation and this is all we're going to get, out of the treasury at one go or in 1 year or whatever. And that's where I went ahead and updated the per epoch to epoch and quarter so that, it could actually be thresholds per some programmable time frame, which I think is a pretty good, catch of that idea.
Yeah, that's a good description. Yeah.
Right. So it's more catching the idea. I also don't see how that could, I don't think that those are going to make MVG. I see a lot of these are, okay, so like I see like a big control as that first one, that percent of the total treasury. It's just one big kind of not like an on-off switch, but then now we have some knobs where we can tune the fader and the the EQ, right, to go do some music stuff. We could, you can, and that way we could maybe have some more nuanced ones. I'm wondering with funding categories as well, that seems like the idea of any of these sort of constraints could be applied like stacked. For instance, the category of building some tooling may not have the same thing as a category of providing accounting services or security services to the community, right? Joey, you had your hand up first. Go ahead.
Yeah, does the treasury have to be one big bucket, or can it be broken into like sections, like a permanent fund and an operating fund that require certain privileges for each?
So right now the concept is it's just a full treasury, right? And that's where this funding category idea is coming in and fits there. Like you're saying, you could and maybe should have smaller buckets in the treasury, not just a full-blown large single treasury, but having things broken down by categories and then maybe by time within the categories, which is that's good work there, I think. Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, I think a proposal track would go in post MVG, and the reason being is it's not currently in CIP-1694, which of course doesn't mean it can't be implemented, but there's no parameter to say, hey, this is a fast track. For example, the concept is that these proposals will elapse over 10 epochs, for example. A fast track might be 5 epochs, for example. There's no parameter in there that says, hey, you need to vote faster and execute faster because this one's going to deliver or slower. So I think it's a brilliant idea, but I also think it might not make the cut for MVG.
For MVG,
you could always put it in there and ask for it. And then
that's where I was leaning toward that. Like it's a little bit of an innovation from what they're talking about right now, but it's like I'd like to like Tommy pointed out, like encapsulate the lessons. Like this is another chain that learned some lessons and did this. If we can build in those lessons before we start, then that helps us have a, maybe a less rocky start. So that's why I'm tempted to put it over here. Even, if
put it on the line right between the two.
Right there you go. Let's do that. Let's do that. We'd like it
valid.
We'd like it in the MVG. And I mean, I'm going to share the video. So, we'd like it in the MVG if we can get it. We understand if it can't make it, but it's a more important feature that if we could get that added, it makes a lot of sense. So is everybody pretty happy right now with these layouts? So the sort of the low-hanging fruit is the percent of the total balance of treasury calculation. That's the low-hanging fruit for minimum viable governance. If possible, a proposal track for different tiers for different levels of funds, write an MVG if possible. And then these others where you have thresholds that encapsulate individual projects or the amount of network activity or the per epoch, per quarter, whatever. And maybe that's tied in with funding categories. So they're kind of nested constraints on different parts of the treasury for doing different things. Then lastly, with off-chain, we have the open reporting system that it just gives us visibility on spending at all times because there's an easy recognizable place that you can go to and get the reporting available at any time. So I'm feeling pretty good about this. Is there anybody else who wants to add to this? Tommy, go ahead.
One perspective we haven't talked about is retroactive funding. And that is something that might actually be something smart to include because you have certain projects that should be remunerated somehow or given thanks to after the fact, after it has happened.
Okay. I've added that as a circle here for this for today, and I do think that's an important discussion to have. How are you feeling about post MVG for that, or is that more of an off-chain thing? Is that something that is
so the way it currently works in the Polkadot version 1, like before OpenGov, they have this tips, bounties, and proposals. So even outside of proposals, they have two different systems. They have the bounties, where you can, like, anyone can make a bounty proposal saying that, okay, I want to reserve X amount of DOT for helping out events in Europe. And then if that gets approved, then they can decide how that gets disseminated for smaller events. And then you have tips, which is after the fact retroactive funding, saying that, okay, I have been hosting this YouTube channel for 2 years and I have 1 million viewers, give me some money. And then people can say, okay, you should get this much, this much, this much, this much, and then the median number is what you actually get.
Okay. Very good. All right, so we'll keep that. I think post MVG is safe for that idea. Go ahead, Rick. You're still muted, Rick, if you're speaking.
Yeah, so for the retroactive funding, that's a good point. I think that would be off-chain.
Okay.
Because it doesn't matter what the funding is for. The only thing that will matter is on-chain is, did it get approved or not? So you could use retroactive funding, right? You could call it program acquisition. Let's say someone submits a proposal that says, hey, this giant chunk of software already exists. Let's purchase it so we can open source it. Let's use Ledger, for example. Let's just purchase the entire Ledger code base and open source the code base. And someone could submit that, even though that code base already exists. It's a matter of the DREPs looking at it and deciding, yes, we want to award that or not. So, but that's, I'm just trying to add some context to that retroactive.
And I think you're right. You know, thinking of what has to go on Ledger and not, like, that's the whole thing with the MVG, post MVG, right? Is that stuff actually has to go in the ledger, the Cardano ledger, not a ledger. But you're right, the retroactive funding, what the funding is for, that's more like hitting the funding categories kind of thing. But I do think that some of that has to be programmatic. I think some of that has to be in the ledger. We'd have to talk it over with them. It may end up being that they can do it all off chain, but my guess is they can't. They're going to have to put those constraints, because the code is law kind of deal. They're going to have to put the constraints for those in the logic, for the business logic for the ledger, is what my thinking is on those. But we'll pass it up the chain and see how close we were. Ken, go ahead.
I was wondering what people thought about the possibility of making it so that people could donate to the Treasury. Like, I don't know if that's
so
like if the network traffic isn't a lot and they've got a lot to do or something. I don't know if that's already possible or if that's something that would go along with this.
So there was a proposal that was funded in Fund 9 that was a loan from the Treasury to, I believe it was DC Spark. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was to DC
Correct.
Spark. Okay. And that proposal, he's getting the money. There's actually no way yet to return the money to the Treasury. That's actually a thing. And we're and there was some discussion of that in Longmont about how that needs to be done and what they have to do to accept funds back into the Treasury. So that's kind of in work. I'm not sure the outcome of it yet. If anybody else has any more insight than that, that's the story up to this point that I'm aware of.
That is a technical spec. It's also in CIP-1694. You can remove funds from the Treasury. There's nothing in there that says you can put funds back in the Treasury.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, governments actually have the idea of voluntary taxation, where you can choose to send more money to to your government than is required. We don't have a sort of a bond type arrangement. We don't have anything like that at this point in the Treasury as well.
There is something in the CIP 1694 that says we can move the DREPs, if approved, can move money between Treasury and reserves and reserves and Treasury, but I don't know the details of that. It just says it in there.
Okay. Yeah, that's the one I'm not familiar with yet either. All right, so yeah, let's see. Make sure we didn't have any new ideas added up there. Nope, we're good. So this is the main work product of today. Nudes, yeah, go ahead, Nudes.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah,
there
I
you
got
go.
it. I just I guess building off the previous question about categories, is there like an emergency aspect of the Treasury? Like if some crazy critical thing happened to Cardano and we would need all hands on deck, all funding to do whatever we need to do to fix this problem, almost, you know, like an emergency fund kind of thing. I'm just unaware if that already exists or if people have articulated solutions.
So the way it exists right now is that effectively the DREPs and the Cardano Constitutional Committee there could be a proposal put forth that said we have an absolute emergency, drain the entire Treasury, put it over here in this other fund, and pay all of these people to do all of these things for this period of time, and that's it. That absolutely can happen right now. There's no constraint to that. If we put these constraints in place, that could stop that exact type of scenario from happening. If you allow an override, there's a very good chance that if you allow the override, that's exactly where the exploit would be. And, you know, someone would declare, you know, they would figure out if there's a way to capture the, you know, the voting through, because remember, this can be through nefarious means. It you know, most of the ones that have happened up to this point have been precisely because there was some fundamental flaw in the business logic somewhere that allowed a voter to gain access to voting by themselves, and therefore they voted themselves to Treasury. That's what has happened, and so that's what this is seeking. It's an additional backstop, but this backstop could also be against the government of Cardano from doing exactly that. Because what if they declared a state? You know, we have this, you know, Constitutional Committee, and they declare a state of emergency and drain the Treasury. Right? There's the only constraint right now is the DREPs. So, you know, that's the way it works today. This could be an additional break put in by the community that says, hey, this is a parameter that if you want more than this, we have to talk about the parameter change. Then after the parameter change, you can have more access to more. So, and I think we did a pretty good job of laying that out today.
Yeah, can't print more ADA.
No, you definitely can't. We don't have that option here. So there's a bottom section here, and this bottom section is kind of for each of us as individuals that participated today. And I'd really appreciate it if you guys would participate in this bottom section. It's what, so what, and now what. What did you learn today? So what is, how does that impact you? How do you feel about that? And then now what are you doing next? How are you going to take your learnings today and go out and do something else with it? So if you guys, I would love for you all to participate in this one. And it just gives a little insight into what you learned today, how it impacted you, and then what you're going to do out in the community after today.
Sorry for my lack of participation, Lloyd. I'm multitasking my butt off over here.
It's all right, Chris.
I'm here in spirit.
Appreciate you listening.
Lloyd, what's the now what column?
So the now what is, what are you going to do next? When you leave here today, is there an actionable item that you can take, you know, after today to share more? What you learned, have another conversation with a friend about, you know, somebody that wasn't here today, you know, that sort of thing. So I just, mine are up there for you guys if you, for inspiration if you need it.
Had to step outside for a minute. Somebody's knocking on my door.
Yeah, no worries, Jenny. Right, you guys can continue to write on the board. I'm actually gonna go ahead and turn off the share. I'll just stop the share. All right. And just want to take a moment to thank everybody that has participated today. That Fig Jam board is open for 24 hours. It will remain open read only forever, but it's open for 24 hours. So you guys feel free to take the time you need to, if you have another insight or idea you want to add to the board, feel free to do so. I'm going to take all of the learnings from today, along with this is now our 4th workshop from the governance series. And so I am going to take all the learnings from all of these. Michael Madoff is the product owner of the Voltaire project through IOG, and he's collecting all of this input, and they're applying all of this input toward further updates to CIP-1694. So today's session will be added with all of the stuff that I've been sending to Michael. And again, when I will be in Edinburgh in July, I'm bringing all those learnings from all these sessions with me there as well, and plan to represent what you guys' voices were that participated in these online sessions, especially if you aren't able to make any of those in-person sessions. I feel it's just as important, if not more so, to get our community, from every voice from every corner of our community that we can, and get us all up and get that information in there. Rick, go ahead.
Yeah. Hey, Lloyd, thanks for pointing that out. Do you have any more information on the Edinburgh event? I'd like to see if I can get in on that.
Still waiting. We're supposed to have an answer of the actual date this week. I'm still playing. It's mid July, and it's in Edinburgh. That's all I have so far. We should have the actual dates here. I hope they were supposed to be this week. So I'll keep asking, and when we have it, I'll make sure you get it as well. So I'm looking forward to participating in it there. I'm looking forward to bringing everybody's voice there that can't make it, and we'll be doing more of these. So on that note, we'll see everybody next week.